I never corrected my husband's family when they assumed I married him for money. They still call me a gold digger behind my back. So when they demanded a postnup for our 5th anniversary to protect their assets, I signed without reading. They threw a celebration dinner and were about to toast when my lawyer walked in with a briefcase. They thought they were playing checkers. They did not know I was playing chess all along. They saw a pawn and never thought to check if there was a queen hiding behind it. Keep watching to see how the protection they demanded for their little kingdom ended up costing them an entire empire. My name is Eliza, and for 5 years, I have been the subject of a quiet, relentless character study conducted by my husband's family, the Harringtons. The subject of the study is the gold digger, and the primary conclusion, whispered over brandy in their wood-paneled study and murmured across the tables of their country club, is that I am a textbook specimen. They believe I hit the jackpot with their son Thomas, and that I have been patiently waiting for the right moment to cash in my ticket. I have never once corrected them. I let them believe I was a girl from a modest background, a scholarship student with good manners and nothing else to her name. It was a social experiment of sorts. I had fallen for Thomas. His kindness, his quiet humor, his complete and utter indifference to my family name, Devereaux, a name that in certain circles carries more weight than gold. I wanted to see if his family could ever see me, the actual person, or if they would forever be blinded by the glare of their own assumptions. The Harringtons are well known for sure. Their patriarch, Harrison, built a respectable fortune in commercial logistics, and his wife, Margaret, has spent the subsequent decades trying to launder that fortune into impenetrable social status. They live in a constant state of anxiety, terrified that someone will expose them as the arrivastes they are. My very existence, my perceived lack of pedigree, was a constant, low-grade threat to their fragile dynasty. Margaret, a woman who communicates primarily through backhanded compliments and strategically deployed pity, was the chief prosecutor in the case against me. "You're adjusting so wonderfully to all of this, dear," she would say, gesturing vaguely at the opulent surroundings of their home. "It must be quite a change for you." Harrison was more direct, viewing me through the cold, dispassionate lens of a risk analyst. He'd joke at family dinners. "Well, Thomas, she's certainly a better investment than that tech stock you told me about last year." Their whispers followed me down every hallway. They saw my contentment not as genuine happiness, but as the cunning satisfaction of a predator who has successfully trapped her prey. They saw my love for their son as an act, a long con so masterful it deserved a grudging, resentful respect. And Thomas was caught in the middle. He loved me, I never doubted that. But he was a product of his upbringing, a man conditioned to seek his parents' approval, to view their pronouncements as gospel. He would defend me in his own quiet way, but he never truly confronted them, never forced them to account for their cruelty. He treated their whispers like a bad smell in the room. Unpleasant, but something you eventually learn to ignore. I never wanted to put him in the position of choosing between me and them, so I stayed silent. I smiled through the condescending comments, accepted the thoughtful but pointedly inexpensive Christmas gifts, and played the part they had assigned me. The catalyst for their final act of self-sabotage was, as it always is with them, a date on a calendar. Thomas's 30th birthday was approaching, and with it, his ascension. On that day, he would gain full, unfettered control of the $10 million trust his grandfather had established for him. The thought of me, the gold digger, having even a theoretical claim on that money sent the Harringtons into a state of sheer panic. The intervention happened on a Sunday afternoon. They summoned us to their study, a room that always felt like a courtroom. Margaret, twisting her pearls, laid out the situation. "Thomas, darling, with your birthday coming up, your father and I feel it is a matter of prudent family planning, a formality really, to protect the assets that have been in this family for generations." Harrison cleared his throat, picking up the thread. "It's called a postnuptial agreement. It simply clarifies that what is yours remains yours, and what is Eliza's remains hers. It protects everyone involved. It protects the family legacy." They were proposing a contract to be signed 5 years into a marriage, a document born not of love and partnership, but of deep-seated suspicion and fear. I looked at Thomas. His face was a mask of pained conflict. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was trapped, and they knew it. All eyes turned to me, expecting tears, arguments, a desperate plea. I gave them a calm, serene smile. "Of course," I said, my voice even. "I think that's a very sensible idea. Whatever makes you all feel secure." The shock in the room was palpable. They had expected a fight. My immediate, cheerful agreement was not part of their script. It threw them off, but only for a moment. Their expressions quickly shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. They had won. The simple, money-hungry girl was so terrified of losing her meal ticket that she would sign anything to stay in their good graces. "We'll have our lawyers draft the documents," Harrison said, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "We can all sign them at a celebratory dinner next week, to celebrate prudence." What they didn't know was that I had already had a very long, very detailed conversation with my own lawyer, a quiet, methodical man named Mr. Finch, who had been managing the Devereaux family trust since before I was born. And he was very, very good at his job. Mr. Finch's office is the antithesis of the Harringtons' world. It's a quiet, book-lined sanctuary in an old, unassuming building, a place where fortunes are managed not with frantic trades and loud boasts, but with the silent, steady pressure of generations. Finch himself is a man of few words, each one carrying the weight of a legal precedent. I had forwarded him the draft of the Harringtons' postnuptial agreement, a document so transparently one-sided it was almost comical. Finch had read it, his expression unchanging, and then delivered his assessment in his usual dry, understated tone. "They are attempting to build a fortress around a toolshed," he said, while leaving the door to the palace wide open. He pointed to a specific clause, the one their lawyers had likely copied and pasted from a standard template without a second thought. It was a reciprocal waiver. It stated, in dense legalese, that each spouse fully and irrevocably waived any and all claims to the other's separate property, including all inheritances and trust funds, whether acquired before or during the marriage. Their entire focus, Finch explained, is on protecting Mr. Harrington's $10 million trust. It has not occurred to them to investigate whether you have any assets of your own that might fall under this clause. He then slid a thick, leather-bound portfolio across his desk. It was the latest quarterly report for the Devereaux Trust. "As of this morning," he said, tapping a number on the summary page, "your personal trust is valued at $312 million. Their agreement, as written, is a gift. It is the most legally binding and comprehensive protection for your assets that I could have possibly drafted myself. They are, in effect, forcing you to firewall your fortune from your husband. My advice is to sign it. Enthusiastically." The week leading up to the, quote, celebration dinner was an exercise in supreme dramatic irony. The Harringtons were insufferably gracious. Margaret called me every day, her voice dripping with the syrupy sweetness of a victor. She was a benevolent queen, bestowing her mercy upon a conquered subject. Harrison treated me with a new, paternalistic warmth, as if I were a child who had finally seen the wisdom of her elders. They were so confident, so utterly convinced of their own brilliance, that they couldn't see the gaping, cavernous maw of the trap they had so meticulously set for themselves. Thomas was simply relieved. He thought the storm had passed. He saw the signing of the document not as a betrayal, but as a necessary sacrifice to keep the peace, and he was grateful to me for making it so easy. The dinner was held at l'Orangerie, a restaurant so exclusive and expensive, it felt like you were eating in a bank vault. The air was thick with the scent of money and smug satisfaction. The Harringtons had invited their closest friends, a collection of equally odious individuals who were clearly there to witness my public humbling. The champagne flowed freely. Harrison stood and gave a toast. "To family," he began, looking pointedly at me, "and to the wisdom of protecting that family. To looking to the future and ensuring that our legacy remains secure. To prudence." A smattering of applause went around the table. It was my turn. Their lawyer, a man with the predatory smile of a shark, produced the documents from a pristine leather briefcase. He presented them to me with a flourish, as if he were bestowing a great honor. "As we discussed," he said, his voice oozing condescension, "this agreement simply ensures that the Harrington family trust remains within the Harrington family. A simple formality." He handed me a gold-plated pen. I took it, and without so much as a glance at the pages, I signed my name at the bottom of the document. A collective, relieved sigh went through the Harrington contingent. Margaret beamed, her smile as tight and brittle as a porcelain doll's. Harrison clapped Thomas on the shoulder. They had done it. The gold digger had been defanged. "Now, Thomas," the lawyer said, sliding the second copy and the pen over to him, "if you'll just sign here, we can make it official." Thomas, relieved and eager to put the whole sordid affair behind him, picked up the pen. He looked at me, a silent apology in his eyes. I just smiled back, a picture of serene compliance. As the tip of the pen touched the paper, the doors to the private dining room swung open. Standing there was Mr. Finch, his expression as calm as ever. He held a leather portfolio identical to the one their lawyer was using. The Harringtons stared, their celebratory mood instantly curdling into confusion and annoyance. "I apologize for the intrusion," Finch said, his voice cutting through the suddenly silent room. "I believe you're missing a few pages of the disclosure." The arrival of Mr. Finch was like a sudden, jarring change in air pressure. The Harringtons' lawyer, a man named Preston, immediately puffed up his chest, his professional territorialism kicking in. "I'm sorry, who are you?" he demanded, rising slightly from his chair. "This is a private family matter." Mr. Finch did not so much as glance at him. His focus was entirely on me. "Eliza," he said, his tone perfectly level, "I have the finalized asset declarations you requested for the execution of this postnuptial agreement." He stepped forward and placed his own, much thicker, portfolio on the table, right next to their now paltry-looking document. Preston, flustered, tried to intervene. "All necessary financial disclosures have been made. This is highly irregular." Finch finally turned his gaze to him, a look of mild amusement in his eyes. "You disclosed Mr. Harrington's $10 million trust," he stated, not as a question, but as a confirmation. "A commendable, if somewhat incomplete, gesture. You seem to have overlooked the assets of the other signatory." He opened his portfolio. The top page was a simple, elegant summary sheet, with the Devereaux family crest embossed at the top. The Harringtons and their guests leaned in, their curiosity overpowering their indignation. Finch, with the timing of a seasoned actor, read from the page. "The primary asset in question is the Devereaux Trust, established in 1923. Its current holdings include, but are not limited to, controlling interest in a portfolio of commercial real estate in downtown Manhattan and the City of London, a majority stake in a leading biomedical research firm, and a private art collection independently valued at," he paused, letting the silence stretch, $48 million. The total liquid and fixed assets of the trust, as of the close of business yesterday, are $312,450,000. A fork clattered onto a plate. The sound was like a gunshot in the tomb-like silence of the room. Margaret's face had gone a color I could only describe as beige, a complete and total draining of all blood and emotion. Harrison looked as if he had been punched in the gut. He, a man who lived and died by the numbers, understood the magnitude of the figure instantly. He wasn't just in the wrong ballpark, he was on the wrong planet. Finch wasn't finished. He looked directly at Preston. "Your document contains a standard and, I must say, very well-drafted reciprocal waiver clause. The clause I assume you advised my client to sign." He then turned to Thomas, who was still holding the pen, his hand frozen over the paper. "The moment Mr. Harrington signs this agreement, he will be legally and irrevocably waiving any and all future claims to his wife's assets, including the $300 million I just outlined. You have, in your admirable quest to protect a $10 million trust, effectively insulated a fortune 30 times larger from your own client." He let the statement land. The air crackled. The friends of the family were now staring at the Harringtons with a new, delicious kind of contempt, the kind reserved for fools who have just been publicly outmaneuvered. The humiliation was total and absolute. Margaret finally found her voice. "This is a trick," she hissed, her eyes darting between me and Finch. "She's lying. This is some kind of elaborate fraud." "On the contrary," Finch said, producing a set of notarized and certified financial statements. "It is all a matter of public record. You simply never thought to look. You saw a modest dress and assumed a modest bank account, a rather costly failure of due diligence on your part." I finally picked up my champagne flute, the one that had been poured for their victory. I turned to my husband. Thomas looked completely lost, his face a canvas of confusion, betrayal, and a dawning, horrified understanding. He was looking at me. "Well, my love," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "The pen is in your hand. My signature is already there. You wanted to protect your family legacy. The question is, which family and which legacy?" I raised my glass to his parents. "To Prudence," I said, a genuine smile finally gracing my lips. "And to always knowing the true value of your assets before you sign them away." Thomas looked down at the document. He looked at his parents, greedy, aghast faces. He looked at their friends, who were now trying to pretend they were invisible. Then he looked back at me. Slowly, deliberately, he placed the cap back on the gold-plated pen. My lawyer stood up, took my hand, and I excused myself from the party. We walked out of the restaurant, leaving the Harringtons to choke on the bitter taste of their victory and to pick up the very, very expensive bill.